Yeah.
So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello, everyone. A very good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the side event on mountain ecosystem restoration. This event is co-organized by the Ministry of Climate Change, Pakistan, and International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, Nepal. My name is Kamal, and I'm working here as a gender associate, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. So, we also have here Syed Muhammad Abu Bakr, Rez Raj Bandari, and Abdul Wahab. They are assisting us with the technical and logistical matters. This event is being organized to celebrate World Environment Day. This international day takes place every year on 5th June. It is the United Nations flagship day for promoting awareness and action for the environment. Over the years, it has grown to the largest global platform for environmental public outreach and is celebrated by millions of people across the world. Now here, I'm going to share the distinguished speakers today in our session. Dr. Pema Gyamtsho, our Director General here at ICIMOD. Honorable Malik Amin Aslam Khan, Minister for Climate Change and Special Assistant to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Ghulam Ali, Program Coordinator, Hindu Kush Karakoram Palmir Landscape Initiative, ICIMOD. Shaoliang, Program Coordinator, the Landscape Initiative for Far Eastern Himalayas, ICIMOD. Bhaskar Singh Karky, Program Coordinator, Red Plus Initiative, ICIMOD. Faizul Bari from FAO, Pakistan. Tauqeer Sheikh is a climate expert from Pakistan. And for offering reflections and other contributions, that will be by Nakul Chettri, Regional Program Manager, Transboundary Landscapes, ICIMOD. Babar Khan, Senior Ecosystem Specialist, ICIMOD. And Muhammad Ismail, Country Representative, Pakistan, ICIMOD. So now moving towards the formal opening, and to begin the program, I would like to invite the Director General of ICIMOD, Dr. Pema Gyamtsho, for welcome remarks, please. So over to you, Dr. Gyamtsho.
Yeah, Your Excellency, Mr. Malik Amin Aslam, Minister for Climate Change and Special Assistant to the Prime Minister. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to welcome you and thank you for sparing your valuable time to grace this occasion to commemorate the celebration of the World Environment Day 2021. It is indeed befitting that we are having this event in Pakistan, as the theme for this year's World Environment Day is Reimagine, Recreate, and Restore. This resonates so well with the bold and ambitious initiatives taken by the government of Pakistan, like the Billion Trees Tsunami Afforestation Program. Personally, Pakistan is very special to me. I still remember standing in awe of the huge mountain ranges in Pakistan ever since I had the chance to visit Jalgot, where three of the world's greatest mountain ranges converge, the Himalaya, Karakoram, and the Hindu Kush, way back in 1998. Indeed, Pakistan has five of the 14 highest mountain peaks that are above 8,000 meters, including the majestic K2, the second highest peak in the world. As you all know, mountains cover 61% of Pakistan's area, and hence for us at ICIMOD, as the regional center for integrated mountain development, we attach the greatest importance to the continued support and guidance from the government of Pakistan to carry out our mandates for mountains and mountain peoples. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the very rich endowment of natural and cultural heritage, Pakistan, like many other countries in our region and beyond, is facing many environmental challenges which pose serious threats to human health and life. Pakistan is identified to be among the top 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change. Climate change is negatively impacting agriculture, and overall economy of the country. The main reasons are increase in global carbon emissions, deforestation, population explosion, horizontal expansion, and lack of finances to mitigate and adapt to the effects of climate change. Water scarcity and the deterioration of water quality is reported to be another major concern for both urban and rural areas. The main reasons for water scarcity in Pakistan are attributed to climate change, lack of enough reservoirs to store water, inefficient use of water for irrigation and domestic purposes. In terms of access to clean drinking water, pollution and contamination with dust and chemicals, poor waste management are considered to be major hurdles. Similarly, one of the biggest issues is the increasing deforestation in the country, I understand. Pakistan is yet to achieve the UN's target of 25% forest cover of its total area, despite all the concerted efforts that the government is undertaking. According to FAO's estimate, I'm glad our FAO colleagues are here today. Pakistan has one of the lowest areas under forest cover at 5% of its geographical area, compared to a global average of 31%. Deforestation is considered to be a major reason for this low forest cover due to energy crisis, commercial benefits, and excessive domestic use. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we are aware that the government of Pakistan is taking the environmental concerns very seriously and that several bold and novel initiatives are being taken to overcome these challenges. These initiatives include the Green Pakistan Program, Billion Trees Tsunami Afforestation Program, and RED Plus. We are also deeply inspired to hear that 9 new national parks were established in recent years, and we would like to convey our deepest appreciation to the government of Pakistan for taking these exemplary steps. In this regard, I am deeply grateful that ICIMOD has had the opportunity to make a modest contribution to the efforts of the government of Pakistan and its provincial governments through its engagement with national partners in RED Plus project in forestry, Brick Clean initiative on air pollution, as well as participation in developing rangeland policy and national food security policies. It has also ongoing collaboration in disaster risk reduction, livelihood diversification, climate smart interventions as part of Upper Indus Basin Initiative, and in conservation of natural resources, particularly forests and rangelands, under the Hindu Kush Karakoram Pamir Landscape Initiative. We hope that with the continued support and guidance of the government of Pakistan and strong collaboration with our implementing partners in Pakistan, ICIMOD will be able to contribute meaningfully towards the protection and management of Pakistan's mountain ecosystems and the well-being of local communities. We remain committed to do all we can to respond to the directives, needs, and priorities set by the government of Pakistan in the coming years. In concluding, Excellency, I would like to once again thank you for gracing this occasion and take this opportunity to welcome all the distinguished guests and speakers. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Climate Change and all other agencies involved in organizing this event, including my colleagues from our country office in Islamabad and from our headquarters in Kathmandu. I wish the webinar all success and a happy World Environment Day to all. Let us think about recreating and restoring. Thank you, and over to you, Kamal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gyamtsho. I would now like to request Honorable Malik Amin Aslam Khan, Minister for Climate Change and Special Assistant to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, to give the keynote address. Please, sir, over to you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And thank you very much for inviting me for this talk by ICIMOD. I think it's a very important day coming up on the 5th of June, and Pakistan is really privileged to be hosting the World Environment this year. And it's a double honor because it is not just talking about an issue which is very close to our heart, which is ecosystem restoration, but it's also going to trigger a decade on ecosystem restoration. Now, the next decade is extremely important, not only for Pakistan, but also for the world, because it is going to set the direction for the next century. And we need to get off this war path that we have with nature at this time. And I think we need to make nature an ally as we move forward into the next century. That is really the big lesson, which is also coming out of the COVID crisis that we've just faced, which is really a crisis of an imbalance that occurred in our relationship with nature. Climate change, biodiversity, they're all manifestations of that very imbalance that we need to correct, and we need to correct it now. I'm very glad that this session has been called by ICIMOD, because I remember in Madrid, there was a very strong report launched by ICIMOD on the mountain ecosystems and climate change. And I still remember that one of the messages of that report was very strong, that this mountain ecosystem, which Pakistan's north is a part of, is actually beginning to heat up much more than the rest of the world. We know the rest of the world is heating up and reaching critical thresholds, but this ecosystem is heating up even more faster, and in terms of quantum, even larger in terms of quantum than the rest of the world. So there is a dire need to focus on this particular ecosystem, because it's an ecosystem in the north of Pakistan, which it also shares watersheds with India and China and other countries, and it feeds more than 2 billion people of the world. And this is an ecosystem which is extremely fragile, and as I said, extremely vulnerable to climate change, and it is already showing the signs of that. Pakistan is, because of its topography, is already feeling the brunt of rising glacial melting. We already have a 5-time increase in our GLOF vulnerable lakes. So lakes which are critically vulnerable to possible GLOFs have gone up by 5 times in the last 3 years, and that is a big warning sign for our north. Unfortunately, I'm asked this question a lot of times, that how can we stop the melting of our glaciers? We unfortunately cannot. It has to be done at a regional and a collective global level to slow down the warming to levels that countries like Pakistan can really handle, even on the adaptation side. So I think it's a critical issue for us, and it's something that that is going to affect us, and we are going to live with it for our next generations. So it is something we definitely cannot run away from. So what Pakistan is doing is really putting our trust back in nature and ecosystems to not only mitigate but also adapt to climate change. We have a very large plantation project called the 10 billion tree tsunami, which is ongoing, which is going to be restoring more than 1 million hectares of forest land in Pakistan. We also have a protected area initiative, which is expanding our protected area coverage, increasing our wilderness areas in Pakistan and then protecting them also. Just in the last 10 months, we have announced 15 new national parks, which add to the 30 national parks that we already had. So it's a 50% increase. And the largest portion of this is in the north. So we announced the Himalaya National Park and the Nanga Parbat National Park, just 3-4 months back. And this covers a huge area in the north, and it actually completes a nature corridor, a high altitude nature corridor in the Himalayan Hindu Kush and Karakoram range, which is good for our biodiversity, good for protection of our glaciers, and also good for protection of this unique ecosystem in the north. So that is happening. And then we are also, as an adaptation measure, starting a project called Recharge Pakistan. This again is a project which is going to be judiciously using are flood waters. We have a large deluge of flood water that goes through Pakistan's artery every year. And we want to use that water and divert it during the flood months, which is about 100 days, towards, instead of flushing it down into the sea, we want to use that flood water and divert it towards our degraded wetland ecosystems. So it will restore the ecosystems of those wetlands and also provide our aquifer a recharge, which is badly needed. So again, this is trying to turn the crisis into an opportunity. But as the Minister of Climate Change, I can say that this is not an easy task. It's Pakistan faces serious threats from climate change, and most of it arises from the fragile and unique ecosystem that we have in the north and the mountains, and focused on this particular issue at the World Environment Day. I'm sure we'll be talking more about it also, and I'll be looking forward to getting input from your discussions later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We are really thankful to you and Ministry of Climate Change for all your support to ICIMOD. Thank you. Now we would move ahead to the panel discussion, and I would now request Babar Khan, Senior Ecosystem Specialist, ICIMOD, to moderate the panel discussion and introduce the panelists. So over to you, Dr. Babar.
Thank you, Ms. Kanwal. Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon and good evening. I am Babar Khan, moderator for the experts panel discussion. We have a great panel of experts, both from Pakistan and outside, to today's theme of ecosystem restoration. In the experts panel, we are joined by Mr. Ghulam Ali, Program Coordinator, HKPL. Ali will join us from Islamabad. Dr. Yi Shaoliang, Program Coordinator, High Life, ICIMOD. Dr. Yi will has already joined us from Kathmandu. Dr. Bhaskar Singh Karky, Program Coordinator, ICIMOD's Red Plus Initiative. Dr. Karky has already joined us from Kathmandu. Dr. Faizul Bari, Natural Resources Management Advisor to F. Dr. Bari will be joining us from Islamabad. And Mr. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh, Water and Climate Change Expert. Ali will join us from Islamabad. I hope they all have already joined us. Just a small announcements in audiences and the format. I will put a few questions to the panelists in the beginning, and I hope that each panelist in response will talk about for 7 minutes. We shall then take few questions from the audience. I would request the audience to please put your questions in the Q&A box, and do not forget to mention the name of speaker if your question is specific and directed to any of the experts. Now, please allow me to start with the panel discussion without wasting the time. I would like to invite our first speaker, Mr. Ghulam Ali, for his remarks on ecosystem restoration in the Western Himalaya. Mr. Ghulam Ali is working for ICIMOD as Program Coordinator of the Hindu Kush Karakoram and Pamir Landscape Initiative, which is being implemented by ICIMOD together with its partners in China, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Pakistan. An MBA degree from the Institute of Business Administration, Mr. Ali has an extensive development background with over 20 years of experience in planning and management of tourism, value chains, entrepreneurships, projects, programs, and institutional development, integrating conservation, livelihoods, and businesses for sustainable development. I request you, Ali, to please touch upon the following questions in your speech. What are the causes and drivers of ecosystem degradation in the Western Himalayas? What type of issues and challenges are there to ecosystem restoration? And what role, in your opinion, local partners, including the government, the businesses, the communities, and private sector, can play to halt and eventually restore the degraded or degrading ecosystem in the HKPL landscape in particular and in the Western Himalayas in general. Over to you, Mr. Ghulam Ali. Now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Babar. Assalamu alaikum and greetings to all participants and whoever from wherever watching. So let me start by saying that the great mountains of Hindu Kush, the Karakoram, the Western Himalaya and Pamirs are the treasure troves for the unique biodiversity, habitat and ecosystem. These are very complex systems and yet great source of ecosystem services to millions of people in the mountains. The combination of a rich flora, fauna, wetlands, peatlands, rangeland, forest, and water towers are the major source of ecosystem services. So is the fresh water, clean air, quality food, medicinal and aromatic herbs to human needs. These services are of a great significance and invaluable to human as well as nature health. Broadly speaking, the constant growth in population, rapid urbanization, and increasing livelihood needs are causing stress to not only the natural resource, but also causing ecosystem degradation. Like other places, HKPL has a challenge and threats to ecosystem include deforestation and removal of vegetation for domestic energy, poaching of wildlife for trade, human-wildlife conflict, habitat fragmentation, including border fencing, land use changes, pollution, contamination of water bodies, invasive and alien species. The other examples include drainage and conversion to farmlands, encroachment of forest and pastures, including for potato cultivation, dumping all waste into streams and rivers, and introducing exotic some sort of causes to the environment. The solutions that worked and so far, because all these are very extensive list, so I will be touching upon a couple of key challenges and the lesson learned from these experiences. So each set of challenge has a solution. Each solution has its unique specificity. So even for deforestation, different set of solutions required, poaching, different solutions required, and human wildlife, so as the land use plan, invasive species and all. But essentially what all these problems or challenges needs capacities, partnerships, willingness, and technical backstopping. At policy level, within policy support and intervention logic, which is bridging science, policy, and practices together. For instance, to tackle the deforestation, alternate fuel in form of energy is important. The energy production and consumption model depends on many countries. For this HKPL countries, including Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China. Except for China, the energy dynamics and model also varies. But what worked well in Pakistan and Afghanistan, to a certain extent Afghanistan and Tajikistan, is social forestry with a community, extensive community involvement has worked very well. But I think the Pakistan, this billion tree tsunami is a good opportunity to take it forward, some sort of a scientific research, in particular, making climate change and to avoid adverse impact of alien species, diseases, and water and weather implications, how all different levels of the sciences are integrated and made it a form of solution. Similarly, the community-based conservation model work very well in Pakistan as well as in Tajikistan to revive wildlife and to address to certain extent livelihood needs of the community at the ground level. It also bridged some sort of building capacities, partnership, and creating a strong bonds between government and community through policy instruments. So this has been a good example of the restoration for wildlife revival and restoration. This wildlife similar state model in China, I think it's China's model has been a little different. The state model has been more successful. But one example that I have seen in court is the pastures management or land range management from the Chinese model is also a role model to see how science, private sector, and ecosystem health can be balanced. So the interventions of the pasture to revive yak and control the grazing and health of the pastures and incentives by the government, financial incentive in particular to the communities and the farmers or herders who are living in the pasture, and also linking them with the markets and poverty reduction strategies is also offering some of the interesting lessons to the countries in also Pakistan, Tajikistan, and of Afghanistan. It is also interesting also that these countries have rich traditional knowledge and community-based management systems for rangeland, including pasture management. So I think there is a need to strengthen the community management with science and policy measures in order to ensure the health of the pastures and also to maintain a grazing balance where livestock, market, biomass, and the community health can be balanced out. Essentially, all public, private, civil society, and academia partnership is required of the day. And all can join hands to restore ecosystem health and contribute where required. The blend of solution lies in balance of science, policy, and practices with the trusted partnerships, capacities, and understanding of the ground issues and respective technical side of the solution. So it is also mandatory that all matter of exploring science, technology, and policy exchange mechanism within the countries and also of the regional countries are an important and integral part. So such efforts needs joint partnerships, and government also needs some sort of making policy based on evidence. Civil society needs to have a momentum of reaching this solution to the far-flung valleys and villages of the communities. But these all protected areas were all these protected areas, including Pakistan, Tajikistan, and Afghanistan, and also can form and are working together for transboundary cooperation on protected areas planning and management. It is I think it's an ideal time on this World Environment Day. I think it can be further endorse the transboundary cooperation on the joint protected areas management and long-term collaboration and long-term monitoring, scientific research, and best adaptation of the best planning and management practices are very important. So the exploring science around wetlands, peatlands, land use plans, and rangeland management. The good part of it that all these resources in all these countries, including Pakistan, ecotourism potential is also there. As we expand the tourism avenues, I think that it has to have first plan before expanding even the tourism, so that further deterioration in the ecosystem is first reversed and then promoted with the best practices that it is maintained for long term. So in conclusion, I would say that The concept of ecosystem services or nature contribution to the people is an emerging science and greatly supporting biodiversity, livelihoods, economies, and sustainable development goals. So understanding and relating ecosystem with the development trends, in particular with sustainable development aspiration and conservation of the biodiversity is very important, where addressing and balancing human needs and nature requirements. It is also important that in all these endeavors, where state interventions, private sector interventions, and community interventions are balanced through consultative and trusted partnership and exchanges. So the more forums and platforms are promoted for the exchange, and in this regard, ICIMOD and HKPL is proud to have this forum of Bam Dunia for exchanges of the knowledge and experiences through this forum and network is worthy to mention. And this is an open forum for the future exchanges and collaboration in this regard. So thank you very much. I will stop here. Over to you, Dr. Baba.
Thank you so much, Ali, for giving an overview of the ecosystem challenges and restoration opportunities in the Western Himalayas. We slightly overrun the time given to the speaker. My request to the speakers would be to please stick to the time allocated to you, so we could save a few minutes at least in the end for some question and answers. I will now move to the next speaker, Dr. Yi Shaoliang, to deliberate on ecosystem restoration in the Eastern Himalaya. Dr. Yi Shaoliang is a Chinese ecologist who works for the ICIMOD as program coordinator for High Life, landscape initiative for the far Eastern Himalayas, which is again implemented by ICIMOD together with its partners in the China, India, and Myanmar. With a PhD degree in ecology, Academy of Sciences, Dr. Yi has a special interest in human-nature interactions. He has over 20 years of research and work experience in the alpine ecology, pastoralism, nature conservation, ecosystem management, and regional cooperation, particularly in the border areas of China, Nepal, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Pakistan, and Myanmar. Dr. Yi has also worked for the Aga Khan Foundation, Afghanistan, of Chengdu Institute of Biology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the Southwest Forestry University of China. As many of you may know, that the wet Eastern Himalaya is rich in biodiversity, particularly forests, wild species of flora and fauna, wetlands, agrobiodiversity, and other ecosystems, as compared to the dry western parts of Himalaya. I would really like to know from Dr. Yi about the common threats to mountain ecosystems in the Eastern Himalaya. What are some of the good practices restoration there, and what are the challenges and lessons in ecosystem restoration? Dr. Yi, the floor is yours now. Please proceed.
Okay, so good morning. Thank you, Dr. Babar Khan, for inviting me for this talk, and good morning to all. Salam alaikum. When we talk about Eastern Himalayas, so we roughly refer to the Eastern Nepal and Northeast India, Bhutan, Northern Myanmar, and Southeastern Tibet and West Yunnan of China. So the major ecosystems, as you know, in this region are forest, farmland, wetlands, and also there's alpine ecosystems. So forest cover is usually very high in this region. For example, the forest cover of Bhutan is over 70%. So it's similar for northern Myanmar. So we're over 70% are covered by more or less intact forests. So there are, of course, many important rivers and also lakes in this region. So this region is extremely rich in both ethnic cultures and biological diversity. So many areas of this region are still managed and used by indigenous communities through traditional use. So on the other hand, a lot of protected areas have also been established in this region. So in most of the cases, actually, those protected, officially designated protected areas are established in the areas where are traditionally used or managed by local people. So a lot of threats are threatening, we can see the ecosystems and causing ecosystem degradation in the region. But if you want to see some common threats, so I would like to see those following are the most common threats, like converting forest into agriculture use. Invasive alien species, so this is a common across the region. Hunting and poaching of wildlife, overuse of pesticides and chemical fertilizers, forest fires, linear infrastructure development, monoculture, which is driven mostly by the government policy and also by market, climate change, pollution, and water eutrophication. Natural disasters such as floods, landslides, and forest fires also cause serious damage to mountain ecosystems. So those are common, very common across the whole area. So when we come to what are the good practices in the region, countries in the region have done a lot of things in terms of ecosystem restoration from different levels and in different aspects. Some are institutional and some are policy-wise, and some are actually related to economic incentives, and some are in terms of technological innovation. And in some cases, it's more achieved by overall economic development and public education. So such practices can be learned from each other and can be useful for other regions also. For example, like in Bhutan, Bhutan has mandated in its constitution, Bhutan preserves 60% of its land under forest cover. So in the constitutional level, so this was there. So because of this set the very high top umbrella for forest for this like ecosystem conservation, mountain ecosystem conservation in Bhutan. And in technical level, Bhutan has another good practices also, for example, like linking the catchment management with electricity generation selling. So those are good in a technical level, we can see. In India, one good example is like in Sikkim. Sikkim has developed itself for many years. It worked for many years, and it has really achieved a good outcome, or it's in like develop the state into a plastic-free state. And also, like it has succeeded in its plan to completely phase out chemical fertilizers and pesticides in its agriculture. So Sikkim now is boasting an increased bee population, butterflies, small wildlife, larger yields, and healthy soil. So those are some very good examples, like from the government level to the general public. And in Nepal, we know Nepal, the community forest practice, and plus so this is a local or like innovation by the Nepal government and the local communities. And also now this is combined with the RED Plus, which is a global mechanism. So those have generated very good results in Nepal. And it also set good examples for the world. So in Myanmar, we have some good examples of like the traditional shifting culture practiced is still in working. They had quite a long recycling like cycle for shifting cultivation, so which gives makes this traditional practice quite incompatible with the overall goal of biodiversity conservation in the region, in the northern Myanmar. So in China, there are a lot of like good practices in different levels, met also with a different level of successes. For example, like the government program, we know this Green for Green program, so which has resulted in a very good outcome in terms of soil conservation and vegetation increases. And another example is a public participation. We know this Ant Alibaba group and a big what's called Ant tree planting app. So this app enables each citizen who is interested in walking, doing your own exercise to strengthen your body. By that way, you can contribute to some money to the company, and the company will use this money for tree planting. So those are the enterprises and technology. And the community level in China also, like in the high life area, we have some good example, like in some villages, people are exploring using biodiversity as a resources for tourism, for ecotourism. So by this way, they have integrated very well the biodiversity conservation and development. So those are the we can see some of the examples. There are a lot of good examples in the region, but we will not detail it. So if we talk about challenges and lessons we have learned in this, we can clearly see a few, like mountain ecosystem restoration. The region is facing a lot of challenges. So those, most of them are relevant. We can say the most relevant to Eastern Himalayas may be the following. One is underdevelopment. So lack of alternative livelihoods, increasing market demand for mountain products, and a large percentage of land already in protected areas. So internal conflicts, weakening of traditional uses and customary rights, and transboundary nature of issues that are causing ecosystem degradation. Rapid but unplanned urbanization in the mountains. So those are the, of course, like a lack of sufficient financial investment and insufficient scientific understanding. So those are the challenges faced by the region. For example, like in Myanmar, definitely the internal conflict has become a cause of ecosystem degradation and also as barriers for effective restoration. And scientific understanding of ecosystems, as we say, human ecosystem relation in the evolution of biodiversity in the Eastern Himalaya is also not fully understood and should be understood if we wanted to really restore the mountain ecosystem. For example, in the Alpine region, what are the interactions, what are the relations between biodiversity and human activities? So this we need to know before we can do effective restoration. And the transboundary nature of the ecosystem and factors leading to ecosystem degradation definitely is a major a challenge in the region, as we know that region is full of borders. So some of the lessons I would like to see here is, so we need to focus on resilience and functions of the mountain ecosystems. So this is very important in many cases, because So we are restoring the ecosystem for the purpose. So then we need to know what are the goals we are going to restore for product or for carbon or sequestration, for biodiversity habitat or whatever, or for tourism effective value. So those we need to have a good understanding. Maybe one good example for this is nowadays one big news in China is about the elephant from Xishuangbanna, which actually is in the tropical area of Yunnan province, which is migrating all the way to Kunming, which is a very dry and like a subtropical area. So its original habitat by the traditional criteria, I mean, not traditional, I mean the Chinese criteria in the past we used are quite successful because the habitat was the forest cover in the original habitat increased hugely. But this actually is exactly the cause people are talking about why the elephants are leaving their habitat, because there's forest without openings are not good for this elephant. So those are the one typical example. And another lesson is we need a holistic approach and a intersectoral coordination. So this is also important. In China, they have this, they are now using what they call the all-in-one map, like all the sectors, agriculture, forestry, whatever, use one map for their planning. So they have only one map. In the past, there are many maps. And the third one I want to say is a general publication. General public can have a great role in this ecosystem restoration. So those is what I can see so far for this a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yi, for sharing your great views. We can understand the level of your knowledge and experience of working in these very important and critical ecosystems. Please keep in view the time that other speakers we give some time to speak about their topics. Thank you so much. It was very interesting. Our speaker is Dr. Bhaskar Singh Karky. Dr. Bhaskar Singh Karky is a Nepali national, holds a PhD sorry, in the economics of climate change policy from the University of Twente, the Netherlands. He is the program coordinator for RED Plus initiative of the ICIMOD's Transboundary Landscapes program. Dr. Karky has published numerous papers in peer-reviewed journals on climate change policy, RED, payment for ecosystem services, microfinance, and renewable energy. He has also worked for the National Trust for Nature Conservation, the Center for Micro, and the Denida in Nepal. Dr. Karky is also an avid trekker and mountain biker. Dr. Karky, would you please come in and share your views about the challenges and opportunities for restoration of forest ecosystems in the Hindu Kush Himalaya? I would like to put forth the following questions for your expert opinions. My first question is, to what extent the carbon financing mechanisms, such as RED Plus, has been useful to manage mountain forest resources? My second question is, what are the challenges and opportunities in fostering RED Plus ecosystem restoration strategy in the mountain areas? Please, Dr. Karky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Babar Khan. Good morning, good afternoon, Your Excellency, Mr. Malik Alam, Minister for Climate Change, respected DG ICIMOD, and colleagues. It is my pleasure to be able to present some of my views based on my understanding and experience today as we mark International Environment Day. So to a short PowerPoint presentation for my panel discussion, I hope this format is okay so that people don't feel too bored of me just talking. So let's go through the slides. To start off with, I want to set the trend in the forestry sector in the region. It is very interesting. There's a lot of diversity. Countries have their own trends. For example, we have Bhutan with over 70% forest cover. And then we have two countries with very small forest cover. As we heard earlier, less than 6%, and Afghanistan, 2%. And at the same time, there are also a lot of initiatives being taken by different countries. One of them is China. Globally, China has the highest afforestation rate in the world. And it started off with grain for green, as Dr. Yi had just mentioned. And now moving on into the new policy that they have called to restore around 13,000 hectares annually each year. So that's a very remarkable step being taken by China. And at the same time, we also have countries like Myanmar that is considered, it has the world's third highest deforestation rate. And again, in this data that is generated by FAO under the Forest Resource Assessment, we see Pakistan and Afghanistan as data deficit area. And of course, we can work together to generate more data in this area. Now, this is the backstage. This is the background against the forestry trend in this in our region. So there are many opportunities and challenges to improve this. One of the impetus is coming from the NDC initiative of the countries. It is good that each country has a strong focus on the forestry sector. For example, Bangladesh has mentioned of their RED initiative, the National RED strategy to further strengthen the role of forestry sector. Bhutan continues to remain carbon neutral and mainly through their enhancing their forest carbon sinks in the forestry sector. India has a very ambitious target of 2.5 to 3 billion, by 2030. And then Nepal's pledged to maintain 45% forest cover, and then by undertaking RED Plus activities more in the lowlands. So these are ongoing. And Pakistan has large-scale tree plantation that we just heard, and I will be talking on this again. So this is one opportunity for the forestry sector to get the support from the NDC. And then the other opportunity is also coming from the climate finance sector. Here you will see that this is a slide, this is a slide that I borrowed from Donna Lee at our ICIMOD workshop in 2017. There are various streams of finance that supports restoration work. For example, you have the FCPF, then you have bilateral fundings, GCF. And what is important, I would like to talk a little bit more is about ICAO. ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization, and they have pledged to maintain their emission levels of 2020. Of course, 2020 was not the best level for baselines, considering that aircraft didn't fly much. But nonetheless, from 2021, they have to reduce emission to 2020 levels, and the first phase is up to 2023, and this mainly applies to the developed countries. So from here, there's a lot of funding that can be channelized to the forestry sector. They have not indicated to what extent, but the whole pie is not for forests, but they will certainly be a good financing stream for restoring Himalayan forest. If the countries here, they all are interested in tapping this finance. Then moving on, I want to highlight the initiative taken by the government of Pakistan. This is one of the hallmark initiatives, and Honorable Prime Minister of Pakistan has again shown leadership in the environment sector, and this is one area where other countries in the region can replicate the 10 billion tree tsunami program. I think the importance of this program is not only for Pakistan, but for other countries to learn how to undertake such a large plantation program, considering that the first 4 or 5 years of such programs are very crucial for nurturing the plantation. And I think there's ample room and opportunity to learn on the what works and what did not work and what are the challenges from Pakistan on this billion tree program, and definitely a lot of lessons to be learned for other regional member countries. Having said all these opportunity, then we also have some threat, for forest restoration program that was taken recently in the first week of April. And here what we see, I mean, 2021 was a low rainfall winter. It is pretty much dry, and because of the increase in fuel load in this Himalayan forest, we see fire right across the Himalayan region from Western Himalayas to East. Of course, Bhutan did a remarkable job. Again, we could not spot any fire at this particular moment of time. But what is alarming is we see this fire right across some of the Western Indian states, entire Nepal, and then goes down to Northeast India, like Mizoram and so on, and then over into Myanmar. Now, the forest fire usually that we see in the Himalayan region is not a natural phenomenon. It is human induced. By large, people rely heavily on forests. Either they want to do shifting cultivation or they want to clear the undergrowth in forest for grazing animals, or sometimes it can also be, they want to burn agriculture residue so that you can plant new crops without investing much labor. So as a result, what starts off as a control fire very quickly translate into wildfire, and this does a lot of damage to the forest ecology. If it is controlled, it is one thing, but by large, this is all uncontrolled fire. And what more? Let me go to the next slide. Here you will see this graph of nitrogen dioxide emission. And okay, what we see here is the blue depicts 2021, and I cannot move this box. Anyway, the other two lines are for another year. I cannot see the legend right now because it's covered by this box. So what this shows why it is important is because these are in different towns in Nepal, and during the forest fire season, extreme high level of nitrogen dioxide was recorded in these areas. Now, when we develop carbon offsets, as whether it is from some carbon finance or some from voluntary markets, we do carbon accounting. And when we have this forest fire, forests emit a high level of nitrogen dioxide, which is very potent greenhouse gas. It is almost 300 times, it has higher global warming intensity than carbon dioxide. So which means that emitting these gases will deduct a lot of your credit. So if you have a forest fire, at least 15 to 25% of your carbon credit actually goes on ensuring these areas against forest fire. So as long as we have high risk of forest fire, your revenue from carbon credit is also very risky, and these huge premiums to pay for it in this insurance scheme. So therefore, I think forest fire is one of the most detrimental risks that we need to address if you want good forest or if you want to leverage carbon finance. So then from ICIMOD side, what pledge we can make to support afforestation and deforestation? First and foremost is we are in a position to support provincial governments to develop their provincial RED action plan that will help the countries to implement their national RED strategy. We have a manual for this. We have tested this in other countries, and I think it's an excellent way to promote the implementation of national RED strategy. And as a learning platform, ICIMOD, we can also facilitate the discussion for leveraging carbon finance, for the finance that national partners, the provincial stakeholders can tap into for afforestation and reforestation work. and ICIMOD having a state-of-the-art knowledge and capability, we can also contribute towards remote sensing-based forest monitoring system and impact assessment. And then as we are a regional learning center, I think we provide a perfect platform for the countries to come together and share their best practices for implementing the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. So with this, I will end here and thank you.
Thank you so much, Bhaskar ji, for a very informative presentation. Now, moving forward, I will request Dr. Faizul Bari to deliberate on in Pakistan. Faizul Bari is working for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization as Nature Management Advisor in Pakistan. His main responsibility under this portfolio is to support GEF forestry and environment initiatives in the country. He is also working as the manager of the GEF-funded Chilgoza project, which aims to reverse forest degradation and deforestation in Pakistan. Before coming to FAO, Dr. Bari was the project director of the Billion Tree Afforestation Project of the KP Forest Department. Dr. Bari has also implemented the KP Forest Department's Kalam Integrated Development Project and the ADB supported Forestry Sector Master Plan. Dr. Bari, would you please touch upon the following in your speech? Why forests are so important, especially for the local communities in mountainous regions? What are the challenges and issues of forest conservation in mountain areas? And what are some of the lessons that you may like to share with our audience here? Over to you, Dr. Bari. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Babar Saab. Thank you very much, and I'm thankful to ICIMOD to give me this opportunity. So I will quickly go and answer those questions. But before that, actually, if you look to the questions, the first question is the importance of forest for the local people. I think it is very important that, especially if you look to the forest, it provides livelihood to the local people, and their whole livelihood depends on them. Their life depends on the grazing animals, fuel wood collection, fodder, non-timber forest products. So in this case, if you look to the rural community, especially high hill areas, the dependency of the local community is very high on the forest. So this is a very established fact. And when their dependency is high, it also brings a lot of issues, and a number of them will lead to degradation of the forest resource. So in this case, it is very important that how these people are confronted with a number of issues regarding conservation and forest management. One of the important issues they have is the no alternative energy source for them. So they wholly depend on fuel wood and fodder and timber construction from the forest. Then non-timber forest produce number of things, and the gap between the supply and demand is too high. And that is the reason that if we look in the past, according to one FAO study, I think it was 2012, the current rate of deforestation and degradation was at that time around 27,000 hectares per year, which is a huge amount of forest deforestation. The second issue which they have is basically they keep animals, and when they keep animal, which is a major source of their livelihood, it means they also overgraze the forest, whether it is pasture and also whether it is within the forest, and it stops the assisted natural regeneration. So there is also a problem how to deal with that, how to make a balance where the nature forest also grow. At the same time, the people are also not deprived from the grazing rights and from the grazing because it is livelihood. Of course, the land tenure is also an issue. If you look somewhere, the land tenure is clear. It is either government forest or community forest. And somewhere, like in protected forest, if you go to Malakand division and other areas, these are protected forests, means belonging to government, but the people have a lot of rights. That clarity is non-clarity and is also an issue, which sometimes the people feel that we should get more benefit from the forest, but they don't look to sustainability. I will come now to the Chalgoza project, which is basically in a dry temperate area. It is a GIF project. And this project is basically two aims. It is the Ministry of Climate Change with the Provincial Forest Department and FAO as an implementing agency. If you look to this, the objective of this project was that we have to bring and restore the degradation and forest deforestation in these high value conservation forests of Chalgoza. It is in Sherani district of Balochistan. Then we have in South Waziristan, Wana, Chitral, and Gilgit-Baltistan, and Jamir district of Gilgit-Baltistan. In this case, if you look, it provides a lot of money to the local people in billions of rupees each year. We have conducted a number of studies each year, and we can see how much total production coming out of that, and applying the market value, we have figures available. But unfortunately, only 20-25% stays with the local community. The remaining amount goes to the middle people, and they were exploiting that resource. And why it is happening? It is due to two reasons. Number one, the people don't have resources, and they get some loan from the outsider and sell their cones, trees much before a year ahead. So the prices are generally low, and they to the market prices, and they're compelled to sell it at that rate. The other one is the processing, because if they will value addition and processing done at a local level, they get good price. And the project, which is the Ministry of Climate Change and FAO and the Provincial Forest Department project, is basically working on two aspects. One is on the conservation, and the conservation is through community involvement. We have constituted Chalgoza Conservation and Protection Committees, total 17 committees, 17 valleys in all 4 areas, and then there are 17 committees. And these committees are then responsible for grazing exclusion, because assisted nature regeneration is very prominent and important initiative under the 10 billion, 1 billion tree and under 10 billion tree project. So that is only possible if the local people will agree with the grazing exclusion. And FAO has signed, under this project, has signed terms of partnership, where the locals have been provided with the Chalgoza cone collection tools. They have been provided with the processing units. They have provided with stores, and they have also been provided with the forest and fruit plants, around 1 million. And from the assisted regeneration, we are getting around 4 million seedlings till now. And our estimation is it will go around 20 million by the end of the project. So this is one of the important aspects, that while you want to manage the forest, especially of the unique ecosystem which is under threat, you need to work very closely with the community, and you have to bring value addition to the local people so that they get more profit. And we hope that this project is running very well, and it brings, especially with the provision of the tools and equipment, the damage to the forest has been
distortion going on, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I'm in Islamabad. I don't think it will be a problem, but anyway, I will continue on that. The issues which we face in the management of the forest, one is the alternative source of energy. As I said, there is no alternative source of energy. Overgrazing, cutting of trees for fuel wood and for construction, and there is biodiversity loss. These are the major issues which we are facing. And the lesson learned out of this project, or any similar other restoration projects, are the involvement of local community is a key for the restoration of ecosystem. For example, the assisted regeneration will only be possible when the local communities are involved. The value chain development needs a lot of work, As it is not the direct responsibility of the forest department, we have to bring the private sector in to support the local community. And that is very important that we don't work only for conservation and protection, increase of the forest cover, but at the same time, we should work on the value chain and value addition to benefit the local. The other important thing is that we need to work a little bit longer term with the local community. A project of 2, 3, 4 years in forestry sector is not proper. And now we are looking for under extension of the current Chalghoza project for the GIF 8 as well. We have discussion with the forest department people in GB and number of Balochistan and KP, and they really want this project to be brought to the next one. Then we are also looking for the formulation of a new GSF project. Of course, we'll be discussing it with the Ministry of Climate Change soon. That will be around, we are thinking about $300 million project, which will also include some loans, some grant and other things. And this project will be basically mountain climate resilient agriculture, looking after the agriculture, forestry, the livestock sector and water. And of course, we are looking for the partnership, a number of institutions and organizations, and ICIMOD will be one of them. And we have already preliminary discussion with them. So with this, I will just conclude that restoration is the most important things, because most of our forests are degraded. And thanks to the billion tree and 10 billion tree project and the government priority, that now everything is reversing. We see the result of 1 billion tree already. We will see the result of 10 billion tree also coming. So the idea is that all the program, we should coincide with the 10 billion tree, which is the priority of the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Your experiences, sort of rich experiences with the audience. It was quite illuminating. Our last for the expert discussion is Mr. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh is an expert on water and climate change issues. He is a member of the National Climate Change Council chaired by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. He is also a member of the External Advisory Group on South Asian Region Climate Change Action Plan, set up by the World Bank, that is engaged in strategic level deliberations and identifying shared regional climate issues requiring collaborative endeavors. He is a member of the Policy Board, Auditor General of Pakistan, that provides recommendations on strategic issues pertaining to the environment and climate change. Previously, Mr. Ali has served on several national commissions and international committees, including the Climate Investment Fund, SET, Advisory Group on Learning and Evaluation, and the Transformational Change and Learning Partnership on behalf of World Bank and other multinational development banks. He has also served on the Climate Change Commission set up by the Supreme Court of Pakistan and the National Task Force on Tourism, which is chaired by Honorable Prime Minister of Pakistan. He has served as founding of Lead Pakistan since 1995 till 2019, and Asia Director from 2009 to 2017, spearheading climate compatible development in several Asian countries. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh Saab, may I request you to please come in and share your views about the impact of climate change on ecosystem restoration in Pakistan and beyond. Sir, my key asks to you for your expert opinions are, to what extent mountain ecosystems are impacted by climate change? It's quite a very common and commonly asked question. That climate change is an urgent threat to mountain ecosystem and HKH Highlanders. Sir, come in and take the floor. It's yours. Ali Saab.
Thank you, Baba Shah, for your very generous introduction. I'm honored to be part of this very important discourse. Coming to the question that is very frequently asked, what is the impact on mountain ecosystems or in upper Indus Basin in this specific case of climate change? I want to give a very short answer. I think we know very little about the impact of climate change on mountain ecosystems and particularly on upper Indus Basin. Our macro picture is a bit stronger, but because the geography is very complex between highs and lows, or the valleys and the passages, the local micro level knowledge which can be used effectively for interventions is very limited. I'll try to explain that a little bit. We know that summer is now getting a bit longer. It comes a bit earlier, which results in more snow melt. Snowfall comes a bit late, and heat waves are increasing. Cold waves are also increasing. Increased heat wave typically means faster melt of snow. These are the broader pictures that we agree that we hear oftentimes, but more specifically, our data and information is very, very limited. Why is limited? Because we know very little about climate and non-climate processes, such as land cover and population change. These drivers of land cover and population interact very closely, and they combine to alter the hydrological responses of the ecosystem there, and that is an important consideration that we have to keep in mind. It is also important for us to recognize at this point that we truly do not know much about the tipping points for the hydrological changes in the mountain systems. So our scientific knowledge is increasing. But we still do not know that temporal patterns of groundwater availability in the upper Indus Basin, how it is changing, and how it is impacted by the changes of precipitation that are occurring now that I just referred to. It is also important for us to know that dominant processing of effective water quality and availability in upper Indus Basin are very known to us in very limited sense. We know a bit more about the weather patterns than we know about the climate, as I just mentioned a bit. The frequency of intensity is increasing, intensity of heat waves is increasing, and cold waves is also increasing. And we also know that the extreme weather is increasing. But how will climate change affect their frequency is not very well known to us at this point. What are the projected changes of precipitation is not very well known to us. The climate modelers cannot be certain about the degree of uncertainty that we'll be experiencing. We know more about the GLOBs, perhaps, and the disaster impacts. We know a little bit more about migration, but we know very little about the development patterns. We know very little about so many scientific processes and aspects that require greater research and collaboration across the border on these things. We know increasingly in Pakistan's context, for example, about landslides and the slope stability. But the local knowledge about them is rather limited and has not been woven into the policy level. Now, I want to highlight two aspects that have greater value in the policy context. And I'm mentioning those because Ministry of Climate Change is co-host, and many policymakers I see are present in the group for listening to it. How do we make development climate smart in the upper Indus Basin? Are there any opportunities in these disasters that visit us? For example, Attabad Lake, at one point, it threatened the downstream villages. People moved, preparations were made, and new economy has begun to appear. Now that it serves as a reservoir of water, can it be used for energy? And there have been some estimates that there may be a potential for 50 megawatt of hydro energy generation from Attabad Lake. Now, it can be studied, it's being studied, but what's more important is to see how different GLOF threats can offer the development opportunities and livelihood opportunities for the communities in the area. It is also important for us to see the health impact of climate change. And because the physical infrastructure is very, very limited to offer health facilities, the question is there a way for the communities to move forward in terms of, let's say, health tourism? Why I'm mentioning this? When the present government in Pakistan announced a 370 billion rupees worth of package for Gilgit-Baltistan, many PC1s and many new projects were envisioned. And a new infrastructure of roads, schools, hospitals, and office buildings and other such construction mostly will come up. But on the software side of it, what utility we'll have of those hospitals if there are no doctors or trained doctors available for posting and serving there? And that is where I've been wondering, is eco-tourism possible in terms of health tourism? Can doctors from Karachi or other parts of the world, or for that matter region, serve there for a shorter period through telemedicine or directly physically? Physically, I mean if appropriate facilities are created for them to go and serve there for a period of time. And that way a rotational system is developed to serve local community. And then same facilities could also attract patients from other parts of the country or possibly the region. Now, I mentioned this because a facility that is designed only to serve local people will find it very hard to attract doctors and other trained professional staff to serve there. And then we'll always be struggling with medicine and all that. But if a greater vision to put in to connect with the telemedicine and ecotourism or health tourism, then we see that the same area can generate a lot more resources despite all the challenges that are emerging in tourism. Now, coming in the region. Now, coming back to the point that I raised earlier, if there is a greater degree of melt, we don't know the impact it is having on the downstream flows. But we know that heat waves in Afghanistan, for example, result early water in our river systems, which is now affecting the cropping system downstream. For example, there are many areas, some districts at least in Pakistan, that are growing early varieties of rice, which are water-thirsty crops. But because there is early water available now, a new cropping pattern is emerging. And therefore, one submission that I wanted to make towards the conclusion, it's an important question for us to see that how upstream and downstream development processes can be linked with one or two examples that I gave, and the rice example I gave from Kabul River. Likewise, I'm seeing that a lot of assertion that early rains or rains or heat waves upstream give additional water. But we do not always have any measurement about the quantities of water that are coming downstream because of changes in a lot of assertion or audits or proper foundation, and no other institution is better placed than ICIMOD to work in cooperation and partnership with other institutions in the regional countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ali Tauqeer Sheikh Saab, for sharing your views and thoughts on the impact of climate change on ecosystems. I hope our audience have enjoyed the discussion and learned a lot about climate change and ecosystems, sir, from you and other speakers. Questions from the audience. Before I ask questions shared by the audience, I'm curious to know from my Dr. Yi and Ghulam Ali, please tell us that to what extent landscape approach can help us really manage the fragile ecosystems through restoration in the Hindu-Kush Himalayan region. Ali and Dr. Yi, my request is to please be brief in your replies.
Thank you, Dr. Babar, for this question. And sorry, I have taken previously a longer time, so I will be very short this time. I think landscape approach is very important. Is these biodiversity and this wildlife has no country boundaries, and each country, even policy, practice, and health of biodiversity and wildlife is important at one part of the border and across the other border too. So these all protected areas needs to have an understanding. And I'll give you one example there. This fencing is creating some sort of a snow leopard movement between countries. So I think the countries needs to have an understanding on this is they need to have, yes, the sensitivities are there, but also at the same time solutions in the respective context are also there. And beyond that, the science exchange on long-term environment, socio-ecological monitoring is important. Unless an exchange mechanism and understandings are not developed, I think keeping a healthy ecosystem understanding and addressing issues and monitoring will become a challenge. So in that context, and also for the many other collaborations on exchanges of science, practices, and policy, community to community. So it's a social exchange, ecological and economical. All these areas are important, linked with the ecosystem for a number of exchanges, and landscape provides a better forum to address that part. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Ali. Dr. Yi, would you like to add?
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we do, please.
Okay, yeah. So definitely this landscape approach and transboundary collaboration is very important in ecosystem restoration in anywhere, not only mountains and plain areas and the sea. So because ecosystems follows no political borders, so that is the reason. It has many, so in this case, transboundary collaboration means either domestically we have this collaboration between administrative units, or internationally between countries. Has many roles to play in ecosystem restoration, for example, better policy and sectorial coordination, or better management of transboundary ecosystems. Many ecosystems actually, they are transboundary. So more complete information for decision making. If we only focus on limit on one country or one administrative area, so we may not have the full information. So complete information is important for decision making and planning. And at least also we can have learning and experiences sharing among these different countries or administrative areas. So especially transboundary collaboration is critically important in dealing with situations like, for example, forest fires, river pollution, fragmentation of wildlife habitats, poaching, wildlife trade, a spread of invasive alien species, natural disasters, or such things, including climate change is mentioned. Those often happens across administrative boundaries or national borders. So actually in the region, in the Eastern Himalaya region, we have many good examples already and it's functioning very well. For example, like with the ICIMOD facilitated the Kanchenjunga Landscape Initiative. So Nepal and Nepal, India and Bhutan are working very successfully in bringing ecological collectivity among many small but important protected areas set up by the three countries. And there also we have the Far Eastern Himalaya Landscape Initiative, which brings cooperation like between Myanmar, India, and China. And at national level, you can see Bhutan, India, and Nepal actually they have very good collaborations and with very good successes in conservation of tiger and rhino. So those are very good examples in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. There are a couple of quite pertinent questions for Dr. Bari about the billion tree afforestation project and then forest ecosystems and the ways to manage it. But before I go to Dr. Bari for these questions, I would like to put a question to Tauqeer Sheikh, again, for a very brief answer, sir, with due respect. Your talk was quite interesting and elaborative, but how can we try to build the resilience of mountain ecosystems and societies, particularly when the increasing climate change impacts are very visible on one hand, and on the other hand, dependence of the local communities on forest and other natural resources in this particularly fragile ecosystem is also on the rise. Your view, sir.
This is a very hard question. And it is not that easy to respond in generalized terms. Probably the response to this question will vary from one locale to the other. But I think 2 or 3 important things in terms of principles that can be distilled is to ensure that the communities are engaged in local level planning, particularly when it comes to the adaptation measures, which is following a pattern of development that's more inclusive and does not marginalize. Then there need to be some transformation of approaches. Instead of thinking the local communities as low-skilled, localized people who cannot transform and have a leap forward in terms of technology, as I gave you example from telemedicine, a doctor sitting in New York or in Karachi, it can be an Aga Khan doctor who already has a credibility in the area to many other possibilities. It can attract high talent elsewhere from the world if we combine with the economic development, which is responsible tourism, such as ecotourism that I mentioned. It's very important to ensure that women are not further marginalized, because what happens is that the development pattern that is imported typically ignores the local sensitivities or accentuates that and excludes, marginalizes several segments such as women. And I think that has to be kept in mind. And very important thing is in terms of agriculture, tendency, at least in Pakistan, is to Punjabize northern areas of Pakistan, which means that if the temperature there is increasing, take wheat and other high carbon or high temperature crops there to grow. Please remember that compared to Sindh and Punjab, northern areas is size of a matchbox, and they cannot be the wheat basket of Pakistan. So introducing new crops and alien cropping patterns there will be detrimental for the fragile ecosystem that exists there. So the R&D has to be based on the indigenous crops there and cropping patterns there that can transform by bringing value added. If I don't have more time, therefore, what I'm just trying to say here in the concluding sentences, it's the value added that lifts people out of poverty, not more yield. Not introducing of alien species. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. One of the participants, rather respected participants, Professor Dr. Bahadur Nawab Khattak from Concepts University, Islamabad/Abbottabad campus, has raised another important question. He wants to ask to the experts, the universities in Pakistan are very much focused on brown issues as issues or environmental issues of the cities. And the green issues, in other words, we can say the issues of the mountain areas are being ignored. He wants to know how we can switch the of scientific research of the academic institutions from the plan areas to at least slightly to the mountain areas. It's a question open to all the expert panelists. Whoever likes to come forward and answer it is welcome, please.
Can I respond to this question? I think this is a very solid question, and the answer, at the risk of a little bit of oversimplification, the answer is that in India, Pakistan, all ICIMOD countries, the environmental agenda started in the 70s, and instead of focusing on Stockholm Declaration that focused on ecosystem, we started focusing on brown environmental issues, which was reducing pollutions for the most part. And which meant we had to create regulatory institutions, new standards to measure effluents and ambient air quality and all that. It had an urban bias. We ignored ecosystem, and most of our development in these countries, and I know in Pakistan more than perhaps other countries, was at the cost of ecosystems. And we have degenerated our ecosystems and diminished their carrying capacity and economic viability. I think going forward, since it's a decade for restoration, what we have to follow is ecosystem-based approaches that do not restrict our intervention and investment and projects mostly to urban environmental issues of solid waste management and ambient air quality and industrial effluents. They are important, but they are not exclusively the core agenda items. That's one. The second is that we have to democratize the environmental and climate change processes that we have not done so far. The history, at least in Pakistan, is that most of environmental laws came during military government, and they are very centralized and urban biased. So these are some thoughts for us to think through going forward towards the next decade. Thank you.
Ali, thank you, Ali Tauqeer Sheikh. There is another question directed to Dr. Faizul Bari from one of the participants who likes to ask that since restoration of forest is different from other rehabilitation programs, like afforestation, reforestation, etc. Is there any example of a forest area that has been degraded or lost by forest fires? How these restoration activities can be performed? Is asked to Dr. Bari.
Thank you very much. As I will be leaving at 1 o'clock because I have another meeting, so it's good that I will respond to this question. Basically, restoration means that this area was already a forest, but due to fire or other abiotic or biotic factors, the forest cover or the density or the species composition is changed. And in order to bring it back to that, like the 10 billion tree project and 1 billion tree, this assisted nature regeneration activity is good because it brings the same species which are indigenous to that area, ecologically suited, and it doesn't disturb too much the ecosystem with the original ecosystem. So that is something which we can call rehabilitation, whether it is due to fire grazing, overgrazing, cutting of trees, but a forest area which has been disturbed or which has been degraded, and it comes with over time. So if the factor which affect the degradation, like if there was fire, you control the fire. If there was overgrazing, you control overgrazing because not to trample the tree, the new seedlings. Number of things can happen and then you rehabilitate. So as such, if you want to plant somewhere, of course you are planting on a barren land or what we call wasteland or whatever. That is not the rehabilitation because you are using another land use and bring tree on that. If you leave it to nature, probably grass or pasture would be the best use of it. But if you want to convert a large-scale plantation, then it is a change. So restoration is basically when it is right within the forest and you bring the resource back to its productivity level, potential productivity level, function and services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Although there are very few very pertinent questions from the participants, but I'm sorry because of limitations, we cannot continue asking questions to our panelists. I would like to thank you all the participants for raising very pertinent questions. We shall now move to the closing, towards closing. But before that, I wish to say that please reach out to us through email if you have any other specific questions to our speakers. We will try to communicate their responses at the end of this webinar. I would like to thank all the speakers for their valuable insights, experiences, and ideas about ecosystem restoration in mountain areas. I hope we all have learned a lot from your experiences. Thank you so much. I would now hand it over to Kamal Waqar for the rest of the programs. Over to you, Kamal. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khan, for very interesting and very informative panel discussion. I would now request Nakul Chettri, Regional Program Manager, Transboundary Landscapes, ICIMOD, for the key messages and way forward, please. So over to you, Dr. Nakul.
Yeah, thank you, Kanwalji, and good afternoon to everyone. After these very enriching presentations and discussions, it is quite a challenging task to summarize. But I have tried to come up with at least 7 points out of this discussion, which could be a snapshot of what has been already talked by our panelists. The first and foremost thing by the eminent panelists collectively, I have collected this is, in this particular forum, we have been discussing in terms of Pakistan as a specific area where it is also part of the HKS region. But what is important is Pakistan is an important and significant ecosystem region in terms of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region that ICIMOD works in. As it was already highlighted, that it is also the area where Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Himalaya are coinciding, And it is important, the dryland areas which are important for water resources and all these aspects. So that gives a very important significance in terms of Pakistan being part of HKS region, and ICIMOD is very privileged to have Pakistan as one of the regional member countries. Another very important aspect is we have learned from our panelists that Western and Eastern Himalaya are different in terms of ecosystem, in terms of culture, in terms of vegetation types, in terms of climatic factors, but they are also rich in biodiversity and traditional knowledge and cultural practices in their own way. But unfortunately, the challenges that is emerging at the global level and also at the regional level are common. For example, the land use land cover change, the climate change, pollution, invasive species, over-exploitation. So these kind of things are common. But more importantly, what we have to look at those regional dimension is at the interdependency. The interdependency in terms of one of the countries, the interdependency in the upstream, downstream linkages, the interdependency in terms of trade, the interdependency in terms of disaster. So many aspects are interdependent. Then definitely, the habitat is contiguous. So definitely, our thinking should be in a collective manner. It is also already reflected that there are major drivers of changes, and it depends upon the intensity and vegetation types as well as the ecological perspective in each of these regions. But what is important is the impacts are quite prominent, and including in rangeland, forest, wetland, and interfaces, which are very, very important to sustain the ecosystem services that is being provided by the HKS region to almost 1/3 of the population. But what is not yet at the standard that we are expecting is, we do know that things are changing. We do know that climate change is there, but we have not been able to deal with this climate change and other drivers, considering the complexity of ecosystem that we have in Western Eastern Himalaya as well as Tibetan Plateau. So micro level understanding is limited, and interrelationship between different drivers like forest and climate change, the land use land cover change, the agriculture intensification. So these interrelationships are still not understood properly. It is also reflected that we do have good practices to deal with the resilience, to deal with the restoration. There are good examples from Bhutan. There are good examples of China, good examples from other countries, including Pakistan, with this military tsunami initiatives. And there is also initiatives taken to balance the conservation and development perspective, where community development and community incentives, as well as biodiversity conservation and ecosystem management, are being dealt in these good practices. But we need a cautious analysis, because whenever we are talking about restoration, so restoration is not limiting to plantation. And there are 60%, I mean, the whole HKS region is 60% rangeland, then 15% forest, and there are arable land, then freshwater ecosystem. So each of these ecosystem needs their own way of restoration. So that needs to be also thought in. Another very important point is we have talked about different type of science, different type of policy interventions supporting restoration and ecosystem management, and also there are good practices happening across the region. So the need of synergy between the line departments, between the country and between the provinces also were also important. And in one of the examples that was cited by Honorable Minister was this HIMAP report that came from ICIMOD, which highlighted the importance of climate change impact on the HKS region, including other drivers of change. So that is quite important. And since climate change impact as well as other drivers of change are impacting at the transboundary context, and the impacts are cascading from one country to another country, so definitely the regional cooperation is inevitable. Another very important point that came in is restoration could be restoration could also be one means of incentive for the local community. And in this present context of COVID impact, then definitely the unemployed that is generated because of this COVID situation might be one way where restoration initiatives could give some incentives to the local community and for their participation in the restoration processes. So this could be also explored. And but there is a caveat. It was also reflected that we need a closer look at the equity. We need closer look at the market-driven processes in terms of restoration, as well as the natural resource management perspective. And another very important point that reflected was changes are there, and it is dynamic. And to sustain this ecosystem, we need long-term monitoring. We need long-term intervention, even for community development. And both the science and community development need to be looked at in a holistic approach and holistic manner. So these are the key points that I have been able to come up with. But what is the fortunate part is most of these aspects are very much part of our ICIMOD's mandate. And in regional program like Transboundary Landscape, many aspects are already embedded, and some of the examples already given by Shaoliang as well as Ghulam Ali. And we have also very religiously focusing and advocating this ecosystem approach in Transboundary Landscape initiatives with a nature-based solution perspective. And ICIMOD is very much committed to address the emerging challenges and the opportunities that is bringing by this decade of restoration. And we would like to work with regional member countries, as well as more specifically with the colleagues from Pakistan, to make our contribution visible as well as impactful. So with this, I would like to hand over to Kanwal again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nakul, for beautifully summarizing the main deliberations and discussions of this webinar. So here we bring our discussion to a close. I would like to invite my colleague Muhammad Ismail, country representative Pakistan of ICIMOD, to give the vote of thanks, please. So over to you, Ismail sir.
Honorable guests, Excellency Malik Amin Aslam Khan, Federal Minister and Special Assistant to Prime Minister of Pakistan, Dr. Pema Gyamtsho, DG ICIMOD, representatives from partner organizations, NGOs, INGOs, universities, all speakers, panelists, distinguished guests, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum. It is a privilege and a great joy for me to extend a vote of thanks to all those who have contributed in one way or the other way to make this event a success. I am really very thankful to our collaborating partner, Ministry of Climate Change and UNEP, for providing us this opportunity to celebrate this auspicious event with them. World Environment Day is celebrated to raise awareness about nature and significance of protecting environment for present and future. For sustaining life on this planet Earth, it is critical that world forests, oceans, and soil are preserved, and these act as a great stores for greenhouse gases like methane and carbon dioxide. Fishermen, the farmers bind nature in order to provide us with food. They provide people with an opportunity to come forward and know the reason behind the deterioration of the environment and discuss various means and methods to save and preserve it for our future. Started in 1974, this day has grown and become a global platform for public outreach that is broadly celebrated across the world. The government of Pakistan is taking various necessary steps to preserve the nature, and ICIMOD is committed to provide full support to the government of Pakistan in this challenging scenario. We have had a very useful discussion today, and I am really thankful to our panelist speakers, Dr. Faizul Bari, FAO, Mr. Ali Tauqeer Sheikh, Bhaskar Karky, Shaoliang, Ghulam Ali, Nakul Chettri, and Babar Khan for highlighting many important issues and some of their solution as well. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. It requires meticulous planning, execution, and a bird eye for details. I have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated colleagues from Ministry of Climate Change, Ms. Hadika Jamshed, our IT, Mr. Aftab and Aslam, our ICIMOD headquarter team, Basanta Sharista, Dr. Ghulam Rasool, Mr. Farid Ahmad, and our KMC team, Said Abu Bakr, Rez Bandari, and Ms. Kawal from Pakistan ICIMOD office. I am really thankful to all of you for your trust and support to me. Once again, thank you very much for all of your time and active participation in this World Environment Day with us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Over to you, Kawal.
Thank you very much, Ismail Saab.
Well done.
Thank you.
So,
So
see you next time
Thank you.
here, this brings us to end of today's webinar. I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers and all participants who have joined this event. Thank you very much. And please get connected with us through our social media, web and digital platforms. And we have also shown, you can see on the screen these web links where you can get connected with us. Thank you, everyone.